Being a standard player in 2025 has got to feel like being a single father. Empty wallet, broken dreams, and still no one comes to play with you on the weekends. It's a crazy time to be a 1v1 constructed player. Standard, huge swath of changes. It feels like rotation has come early, with a lot of big hitters in the format actually leaving in July come the new set, but with many other formats with no changes, which is huge. A lot of upset all over the world. And you know what, timestamps down below, we're going to be talking about a little bit of everything here, especially with how I've been playing Magic recently. I've been kind of getting into every single constructed format just to provide a voice to it. And so when it comes to this, with these timestamps down below, we're going to be spending a little bit of a different time. So you're going to see, we're going to leave standard to the end. We're going to be touching on Pioneer first, but some of these formats like standard and legacy specifically, we do need to have a deep conversation about. Whether that be good or bad is up to you to come and watch. So all the links are going to be down below to everything I'm kind of showcasing here. Let's take our time and firstly approach the modern format, how many of you have probably joined this channel to kind of hear about. So it's worth mentioning Wizards already said that there's no modern changes today because it's the middle of the RCQ season, which is fair. This wasn't something that I was necessarily focusing on. It was something I was aware of, but making all my kind of predictions and everything, I wasn't fully kind of aware of. And so at this point, I'm going to have to temper my expectations. I spent the whole weekend kind of doing so. And so we're in a world where we have to be okay with what's going on in modern when it comes to energy. So no changes. While we previously announced that there'd be no changes in modern during this announcement window due to the ongoing season, we did want to check in on how we're viewing the current state of the format. Notably, the next BNR is in November 2025. The last 6 months of Modern have been seen a massive shakeup, several cards moving off the ban list onto as well, followed by the banning of Underworld Breach just a few months ago. In the time since, it wasn't clear how things were going to shake out, which is wrong. I don't think that's true in any way, shape, or form. I think it was very clear how things were going to shake out, and I think that statement is genuinely disingenuous. Other than players believing that Boros Energy was going to be the top dog. Yes, that's very true. In some respects, that is true and has remained true for the past few months. I don't know why we're saying in some respects. I think there has been a lot of changes and adaptations. Domain Zoo has kind of seen a lot of rises, and Amulet Titan has seen a lot of boosts as well, kind of turning into a soft combo deck that's going to be a bit of a pattern from what we're seeing. But let's go through the kind of piece that's written here. Players that assemble the deck to play in the current RCQ season have had a pretty good time with it, as the deck has remained the most played archetype in the last few months. That being said, its win rate and share of the metagame have steadily been coming down over time. Cori-Steel Cutter from the Tarkio Dragonstorm and Ketchamos the New Dawn from Aetherdrift have both supplanted existing decks in Modern, letting them flourish in the face of Guide of Souls and its ilk. Ketchamos in particular has led to a further exploration of the previously two-color Orzhov Blink deck, now splashing blue for Psychic Frog in some sideboards. So kind of talking about, again, how we've seen the rise of Izzet Prowess in almost universally all formats. There are legacy decks also playing Cori-Steel Cutter as well, but standard, in Pioneer, in Modern, the card is just a good Magic card overall. But the Orzhov Blink deck is essentially the result of people realizing that, you know, we have taxes at home, like Orzhov taxes at home. But the thing is that the home is a 5-story mansion, and it's actually much better to be there. You got a butler service and everything. We all realize that Thalia, Guardian of Thraben, is not a good Magic card anymore, thanks to especially X1s being at an all-time low, thanks to Orcish Bowmasters. You know, having taxes at home is actually pretty lit when your home, again, is a pinnacle piece of society behind a gated neighborhood that is the price point of Modern. Psychic Frog being in the sideboards of these decks is, I don't even think this is something to flex, honestly. Psychic Frog is an insane Magic card, but hey, you know what? I don't mind playing Modern Horizon Soup. If we just kind of look at some of the symbols of these cards, yeah, a lot of recent sets, but you know what? In a way, I will say, kind of is a good thing. You know, there are cards in here that see play in standard. You know, we're going to get these Shocklands reprinted as well. And so there are cards in here that see active play in what we would consider the lower formats for Modern. So there is some positivity to be taken out of this as well when it comes to some of these innovations. On top of this, giving players new tools for existing archetypes, we're also seeing players explore and adapt to the current environment. Gruul Broodscale is a newer deck championed by Hunter Ovington in the recent Magic Secret Lair Spotlight. And so this is kind of a different flavor of Eldrazi. So we have the ramp-based strategies that are green and red, top ending with kind of massive Eldrazi's, big Ember Cools and all that stuff, taking your turn, kind of just playing a similar plan in my mind to what like the energy decks are doing. They just do it better in the late game. They just have bigger, splashier bombs. They may not have like the early game aggro, but once they get in the late game, they just kind of do what the kind of energy decks want to do better. And then this is an Eldrazi flavor that acts as a combo deck, and so of course it's going to have a spot in the metagame because, as I was alluding to earlier, Modern is a full house of just combo decks. It is just combo decks, and it is the kind of mid-range decks. It is the Boros energy deck, it is the Blink deck. Pretty much that's it. I mean, I'll kind of will give sentience to the fact that the Dimir deck is kind of a mid-range deck as well. It's not completely control, it's like tempo-ish. So it's mid-range, there is no necessarily like hard control, but there's combo all over the place as well. So I guess if there's combo all over the place, there is something to be said about Jeskai control being there with Wrath of Skies and all that stuff. But recently in a video, like if you view it in that lens, there's a video or a podcast from the Eternal Glory podcast, a couple players that great minds when it comes to Legacy may not be playing Modern as much, talking about how if you have a creature-based strategy at the top, isn't that what you want? No, because that deck does everything. As like, I remember Bosch and Roll talking about how, yes, in theory, the deck is really good to have at the top. Boros energy. It plays creatures, it goes sideways, it has a lot of synergies amongst each other. It doesn't do anything like necessarily like super broken, it just does everything really well. And that's the type of deck that you want at the top of the format. Unfortunately, you cannot use your legacy mindset in a format like Modern that is not able to handle things like this. If you take a deeper look at the Modern format, which is what we're going to do in a second, we see a very different picture. So right now, Boros energy still at the top of the metagame. Why I'm upset at this is that it is the only double-digit representation of a deck at the top. If we look at the last 3 months of Modern, Boros Energy is the only deck at over 10%, right? Oops, I kind of went backwards there. Let's go back here. Boros Energy still at the top in terms of being at over 10% over 90 days. If we go to 365, Dimir Murktide slightly sneaks in at 10%, which means over the past year, consistently so, Dimir Murktide, sure, it gets up there, but Boros Energy consistently has been over 10% of the metagame, if not higher, and no other deck has come close to that. If we go to 30 days, again, 14 days, again. Let's see if it changes at 7. No, it doesn't even change at 7. This is my problem with Boros Energy. Yes, there will always be a best deck. And yes, on the other side of it, we could quote unquote accept what this is in Modern. My thing is me personally, I am okay with accepting this as Modern, but other players aren't. And so I want to speak to that equal voice. As a Modern Mill player that has been avoiding playing Mill for the past like 3 weeks, because I figured something would change out of this. I figured we would see the light and see that something is happening with Boros Energy. That it is at this representation so high, and that over the past 30 days, we have mid-range deck, combo deck, straight up combo deck, aggro deck, right? Aggro cheaty big deck, and cheaty as in like it's just playing big things, right? With domain. Amulet Titan, largely a combo deck, mid-range deck. Prowess, aggro deck, okay? Combo deck, mid-range deck, combo deck, mid-range, combo. Grixis control, mid-range. Colonist control, a little disingenuous, mid-range, okay? Neo brand. The format, the combo deck, by the way, is very, very, very aggressive. It's centered around 1 to 2 bombs and protecting that bomb. Boros Energy, with its whole start on the whole Guide of Souls nonsense into Ocelot Pride, Ragavan, then you could even play that damn enchantment, the Goblin Bombardment, into the Ajani. There's so many problematic lines in that deck. It takes it over the game so quick. The combo decks are the only ones that don't care about that. I don't care if you're playing out an Ajani. I don't care if you're getting all this energy. I don't care about this. I don't care about that. I can just be faster than you. I can ignore everything you're doing and protect my own plan and be faster than you. The aggro decks are pretty much saying, I can be faster than what you need to do as a energy deck, because I can not only hit you for face, I don't need to set up additional resources and synergies to get the ball rolling. That's what the mid-range decks are trying to do. They're trying to set up a group of synergies to overwhelm you in the game. That is what Orzhov mid-range is trying to do, Esper mid-range is trying to do, and Boros Energy is trying to do. It's trying to assemble a couple of pieces to get over top. But the Izzet Prowess deck and the Domain Zoo deck can say, I can play 1 to 2 threats, play a bunch of random other crap that's just really powerful, does damage, does stuff. And I don't need to assemble a group of things together. My cards don't necessarily combine with each other. Yes, there are synergies, but I don't need A plus B plus D. A, B, D, right? All of these pieces, heck, even C and E, if I just ignore all of those pieces, if I just get some semblance of the alphabet together, it will work. But the mid-range decks are trying to say, I need specific chunks of the alphabet to come together. And the combo decks are saying, forget the alphabet, I just need Z, Y, and friggin' X, and I'm there, right? And everything about my deck is ignoring everything else and just trying to get to those. The format is not necessarily diverse, but as a modern mill player, I'm willing to accept this. I'm at the point where, look, I realize we're not going to get changes. I'm not going to complain too much about it. I made my rant video about Boros Energy. At this point, it's up for us to adapt. Let me know in the comment section down below if you want to see a separate video on that. I probably will be making a modern mill video about that, kind of bringing back mill content on the channel when it comes to modern. It's just an added acceptance point. I just got to be good with it. There's a lot of good matchups for mill at the top here. With some adaptations, I think we can get there. So maybe it's time to throw my big boy pants on here and stop complaining about modern, because yes, I have plenty of problems with it. But this is going to be our truth until November 2025. When it comes to Pioneer, I feel like y'all have scammed me. I'm not going to lie. I hate Pioneer players. I hate all of you. I'm going to be straight up here. Okay. Some of you are my friends and I love you for that. But I feel like all of you have gotten me to invest in a massive crypto scam. I'm not lying. Playing Pioneer feels like I bought a meme coin off of, like, you know, Pioneer Player 69. This format is absolutely a joke. It's insane. There's no RCQ season whatsoever. There's no semblance of competitive whatsoever. They made no changes. Repeated ban updates. The format is all red aggro. Look at this paragraph. Okay, Arya says, no changes. We remain happy with the state of Pioneer. Since our last announcement, the format looks healthy and... Okay, I'm not repeating that. Newer cards continue to make splashes in the format with the addition of Cori-Steel Cutter to Izzet Phoenix list being the largest change, accompanied by smaller changes like the adoption of Terra, Magical Adept, and Enigmatic Incarnation lists. None of these changes have led to any decks having problematic play rates. I'm sorry. Are we playing the same format? So I got into Pioneer through the combo decks. I think a great way to get into many formats that are quote unquote close to being healthy or accessible is getting in through their combo decks. You learn extreme lines, you learn, you learn your mulligans, you learn what's good and what's bad, and you learn a little bit of everything. You learn a lot of decks' primary plans, you learn how they like to adapt. That's great. So I got in through Hidden Strings, okay? That's what I'm playing and practicing right now. Mono red aggro, if we look at last year. Okay. Top 3 decks in the format over the last year. A little disingenuous because, you know, there's been some changes earlier in that year, but it's all red. Mid-range, red aggro, Phoenix. Cool. Okay. Now, those decks do play very differently. Rakdos mid-range, very different for mono red aggro and Izzet Phoenix. These are still very aggressive strategies, right? These are still very aggressive strategies, but I will admit to the fact that they play differently, and that does matter. That does matter. So the format over the past year has gone through evolutions. Okay, so let's admit that. Let's hone in a little bit. Let's hone in. Go to 90 days. Okay, now this is where things start getting a little interesting. Mono red is at the top of the metagame, over 20% of the metagame. The next most played deck is half of that. The next most played deck is half of that. You go to 30 days. Oh wow, over a quarter of the metagame. 14 days. Oh, almost 30% of the metagame. 7 days. Pretty much 30% of the metagame. 1/3 of the metagame is pretty much just mono red aggro. And you know what? In many ways for people, this is the dream. Because if we open this in a new tab here, folks, Heartfire Hero standard legal. Emberheart Challenger, standard legal. Manifold Mouse, standard legal. Oh my god, this is just a mouse package. Wow, we get to play our standard cards in Pioneer. Oh my god, wow. Wow, this is just a mouse pack. This is literally mono red in standard ported into Pioneer. Oh wow. Screaming Nemesis gets around temporary lockdown. Standard legal, great in the mono red decks. Sunspine, another mono red card. Who'da thunk it? Who'da thunk it? Players can't gain life. Who'da thunk it? Burst Lightning, standard legal. Monstrous Rage just banned in standard, by the way. You know, one of these Heartfire Hero as well, by the way. Reckless Rage, Lightning Strike. Oh my god, standard legal. Kumano. Okay, Mountain, standard legal. Mounted. Wow. Wow, 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 wow. Look at, again, the majority of mono red in Pioneer is just standard mono red. Cool. We get to play our standard decks in Pioneer. That was one of the original goals. Okay, cool, great. The problem is, mono red in Pioneer in standard has taken over the metagame so much. The top 8 of the last PT Final Fantasy was just red decks. It was the best Is It Prowess players versus the best mono red players, and mono red ended up taking the chip. What are we doing here? We looked at standard and banned like 6 cards. Red is all over the place. The format is just red in the decks that can beat red. We then look at Pioneer and say, we are okay with the play patterns. What? What, are we playing the same format? They just printed the most powerful red package ever, and it's just all over the place now. Thankfully, Modern is just doing more broken things. If not, it would just be doing the same thing. And to be fair, Cori-Steel Cutter is in there. What's crazy is mono red here. What's crazy is the mono red deck here probably could beat Boros Energy here and there. It's just Boros Energy actually has a good removal package that could deal with a lot of this. It has a good mid-range package as well. Once it's able to stabilize, it's just going to be able to get past this. But a lot of these cards are really hard for even modern decks to deal with. Screaming Nemesis is a really hard card to deal with in combat. Heartfire Hero as well, once it starts to get going, like, these decks can beat you on turn 3. Pretty much just shut you down, right? So it's absolutely crazy to me that we looked at this metagame and said mono red aggro is a quarter of the metagame, and this is perfectly fine. So I don't want to completely end off on saying like it's just red everywhere. Is It Phoenix plays completely different from mono red? So I want to be a little consistent here. Someone in one of my recent videos talking about like bans and everything told me to be consistent, and I just don't think they knew what they were talking about overall, right? They were just like cherry picking everything. But I also do want to acknowledge some of what they were saying and be consistent with it, and just talk about how here, this is ridiculous. This format is a joke. People convince me to play Pioneer, and this is Pioneer. Pioneer is not a fun format. You're insane. This, again, I feel like I've been looped into a crypto scam. What are we doing here? This is insane. No, we are happy with the play patterns of this format? Nah, that's a, nah, that's, I don't know. I don't know what to, I don't know what to tell you. I don't know what to tell you. Let's talk about Pauper. Pauper's a format that I'm actually relatively happy with. Honestly, I think Pauper's pretty diverse. The comment talking about like me being disingenuous about play patterns, like this is where they don't know what they're talking about. They're simplifying my Pauper argument. It's clearly someone that like doesn't play Pauper enough or doesn't know what they're talking about like at all. So the Pauper format panel overall, they're happy with the bans that they made on Deadly Dispute, Trial Unbanning Prophetic Prism, also High Tide. So really, they're kind of happy here. High Tide, on the other hand, has been more contentious, right? And so this is an interesting situation. Looking at the Magic Online data, High Tide hasn't been noteworthy, sitting at just about 50% win rate. Just for reference, the current top archetype by win rate among the several most is Fairies, sitting above 55. And this is why I love the format panel. The format panel discussion is going to be really important once we get into Legacy. And the reason I wanted to highlight that is some of the data that we get. So we specifically get callouts to things that they've done and trialed over time. And we get win rates of a specific deck that they want to talk about in context, bringing about that Fairies being a top 5 deck, not at the top of the metagame, by the way, has the highest win rate by current archetype at 55%. Not even Burn, which is at the top. with some matchups that are some of the lowest win rates ever in any format. For example, High Tide carries a 10% match win percentage against the aforementioned Fairies deck and a sub 30% win race against Rakdos Burn decks. Winning only half of its matches against multiple decks in the formats is exceedingly unfavored against normally it would cause any banning again. The problem is High Tide's play patterns, right? And so for those of you that don't understand, High Tide, until the end of your turn, whenever a player taps an island for mana, that player adds blue to his or her mana pool. So essentially it doubles the amount of mana that your island can produce. If you play 1 High Tide, your island taps for 2. If you play 2 High Tides, your island taps for 3. If you play 3 High Tides, your island taps for 4, right? So it produces 4 blue mana. So there is a combo deck in Pauper that looks to use similar cards to the Lotus Field decks that like untap things, and you tap out your lands for a bunch of mana. You continue to draw through your deck by use of spells that reveal other spells and draw through your deck and all that stuff. Honestly, like relatively cool interactions, but there is a lot of clicking involved. Again, Bosch and Roll in a recent episode of the Eternal Glory podcast talked about how like the Walls combo deck is like more egregious than this one. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true. I tried like two leagues or like 2 sets of games. It wasn't leagues, it was like a bunch of games, 2 sets of like practice sections with High Tide, and I just felt like there's way more clicking, way more clicking. There are notable good pilots of this deck. Calicase has been doing really well with it recently. He's posted about it a bunch on his channel, but really what it's about is the play patterns. However, the play patterns of High Tide take a large amount of time to resolve and are cause for concern. So you can imagine playing High Tide, tapping out all your lands, untapping them, drawing a bunch of cards, untapping them again, just going until you can produce a bunch of mana to sink into a giant spell and win the game. That takes an amount of time, right? And you do have to get to relatively like turn 4, sometimes even turn 5 to even get there, because you do have to spend a lot of time, turn 1 through 3, sculpting your hand. That's what it is. It's just sculpting your hand. You just have to live to that point. And then even if you get to that point of being able to combo off, if you just have one of your High Tides like countered, you're not getting there. You need at least 2 High Tides like resolved on your turn, plus some amount of draw spells to even get there. There's a lot of things that you have to accumulate to win with the deck, which is why the deck has a has a 50% win rate, but in some matchups has a sub 50% win rate in a lot of cases. It's a combo deck that's allowed to exist in the format, but there's a lot of answers to it. But when it's going off, it's really hard to determine if the player is able to win. So you almost have to kind of sit through it and play through it, because you don't want to like just auto concede and create a play pattern where people start going off and they don't win. So it's problematic to sit against. This is a reminiscent problem that other formats have had, for example, with Second Sunrise and KCI combos in Modern. This is certainly not the only deck in Pauper that has non-deterministic combo wins that can take a while. For example, Cycle Storm. Historically, the rate, how much of the metagame share a deck has, of those decks have been low enough to the point where it hasn't been an issue. So for example, really where Cycle Storm lands is the combo decks that use Lotus Petal and Dark Ritual, right? Those are the decks that go all in. They're able to do some busted things, but the problem is the tutor consistency in Pauper doesn't exist for you to be able to find these. The combo decks that exist in Pauper, you do have to amass a critical amount of spells, but it can feel like they win really quick or crazy out of nowhere, or have a lot of options once they get there, but they have to amass those options once they get there. So again, with blue all over the top with kind of Dimir Terror and Fairies, it's hard for these decks to get there, especially when you need to resolve a bunch of rituals. A well-placed counterspell really stops you if the first thing they counter is your Dark Ritual and you're not able to take it off from there. So Cyclostorm has a much higher win rate than High Tide at about 51%. That's kind of sick. Cyclostorm, really sweet Pauper deck, one of the really most unique combo decks out there. In the case of High Tide, however, the play rates are high enough to cause this time-based problem, though it's hard to tell how much of a problem it is with the exciting new thing. So they're extending the trial unban of High Tide. To that end, though, they might note that elsewhere in the article, the next BNR is November 24th. We on the Pauper Format panel don't believe it's appropriate in this specific case to wait that long to tell you the fate of High Tide. We need some more time to collect data, but not until November. If we do think it's a problem, we want to step in and remove it sooner. We also don't want to make a change that close to Eternal Weekend in Europe, where, again, Legacy and Vintage are the most played formats and the most high ones, but obviously Pauper is going to be a big one because Pauper in Europe is just like so big. there'll be a lot of Pauper being played. We are expecting to come back and deliver a verdict within the next few months, likely August. And this is one of the things I love about the Pauper Format panel. The transparency, the information that they're taking from, the awareness of where different things are being played, right? The playing around different tournaments. And I like that they're saying specifically that, yes, we are committing to you as a format panel to taking data and coming back to you sooner. They're doing a trial unbanned. This is something that only this panel is doing, trialing something, and potentially we could see it banned again if it's a play pattern thing. High Tide was unbanned because a lot of the broken stuff that unbanned lands wasn't there, you know, like Cloud of Fairies and stuff like that. But if we see that the play patterns, not necessarily the power level, becomes problematic, then we're willing to ban it. And that's great. This is the type of format curation that we love to see out of the format panel. And in many ways, Pauper is in a really good spot. If you look at the metagame, being consistent with our play patterns, yes, Burn, Madness Burn at the top. The thing you have to remember is that these decks play very differently and the play patterns are important. Yes, you're still casting Lightning Bolt, Lightning Bolt, Lightning Bolt. You're still casting burn spells at each other. But the way we get there is very different. Burn, regular Burn, even though it's showing 3 colors, some of them are playing Sneaky Snacker and Faithless Looting. That might be the evolution now. But really what you're trying to do is throw a bunch of burn spells at your opponent. Keswick Flame Breather triggers whenever you cast non-creature spells. Great. Madness Burn, however, is trying to cast cards with Madness, right? Alongside creating kind of like a weird mid-range tempo plan where they're discarding Sneaky Snackers, and whenever you draw like more than like 3 or more cards a turn, you would return Sneaky Snacker from your graveyard to your battlefield. So it's almost like it's creating value out of something that would essentially be a downside, and it's more explosive. Whereas Burn regularly just being red is more consistent, I guess. It's, you know, kind of gets you dead over time. Madness Burn just says, you know, yeah, you're at 19 life, you're at 18, you're at 17, you're at 15. All of a sudden you're at 5, right? It just explodes out of nowhere. Very different play patterns. Also, Jund Wildfires is at the top of the metagame. Jund Wildfires, again, Brian Cook of the Epic Storm put it really well. Jund Wildfires is the closest thing to old Jund in Modern that you will get in Pauper. It is by the books, mid-range, play out a threat, draw cards, discard from your opponent, play the tempo game, remove here, block here, whatever. It is one of the truest forms of mid-range that you will find in any Magic the Gathering format. And the fact that Jund Wildfires can be at the top of the metagame is a beautiful thing. That is a great thing. We have Burn at the top. We have a true mid-range deck, truer than many other formats can actually say. Blue Terror and Mono Blue, very different decks. Blue Terror is a control tempo-based strategy that looks to poop out giant creatures for cheap while holding up tempo-based interaction like spell pierces and counterspells. Mono Blue Fairies looks to overwhelm you through a wide board of Death by 1,000 Needles. It plays the spell starter sprites, it plays the counterspells, yes, but it also has cards that tap down your creatures, you know, give your creatures power debuffs and everything, and gets in through unblockable creatures in the air, returns spell starter sprite to hand with Ninja of the Deep Hours. And so again, overwhelming advantage by drawing through the deck. Mono Blue Terror creates a clock with 5/5s, like 1 mana 5/5s and 2 mana 5/6s. Mono Blue Fairies, Death by 1,000 Needles. The counterspell package is there, but the way you answer these decks are very different, and they end up actually playing out relatively different, although being combo deck, control decks. Dimir Terror, similar to Blue Terror, except you're playing black for removal and snuff out. Elves can be an aggro combo-ish type of deck. Like if you have like I'm forgetting the name of the elf. It's 2 mana green and 1 for a 1/1. You tap for each elf on the battlefield. If you have that and a Kyrian Ranger out, like it really does feel like a combo deck sometimes. Bogle's a great answer to the burn decks. High Tide combo aforementioned. Grixis Affinity will always be here as long as we have the tapped artifact lands. You have a graveyard-based strategy in Dredge. Ephemeratron, you have a big mana deck, two types of big mana deck, kind of flicker and artifact-based, mono white aggro, walls combo. The format is really diverse, and especially if you think about percentages, 13% of the metagame, 11% of the metagame, 10% of the metagame, roughly if you look at 365, look at how diverse this is. Look at the metagame breakdown. 9%, 8%, 8%, 7%, 5%, 5, 4, 4, 3, 3. Like it's so split up over the last year, 90 days. Very similar thing, 10, 10, 9, 8, 7. Like the percentage breakdown of these Pauper decks is great. Pauper is in such a great place. It is one of the best formats to be playing right now when it comes to 1v1 60 card constructed Magic. and I couldn't speak its praises anymore. It is a great format. It has so much to it. You can play combo decks, you can play control decks, you can play mid-range decks, you can play aggro decks. It's a little bit of everything, and it's great. If you are a Magic player that has a favorite deck in another format, you can get a similar feel, if not the same type style of deck in Pauper. Go check it out right now. Legacy is a whole new discussion. Legacy, okay. So these are some of the formats that I'm going to be spending some amount of time on, and I think Legacy, actually, I think I might spend, like, I'm going to try and be a bit more impactful with these statements, right? So I'm going to spend as much time. I would highly recommend you check out videos tomorrow from Thraben U and Bosch and Roll, and I believe Brian Cook already had his live reaction. I decided not to look at that just yet. I probably will after the recording of this video. But Legacy, it's been a few months since we last took action. No changes is insane because Legacy is at a crazy point right now. And there is a lot of things to consider. You have a format that is an official Wizards of the Coast format that will never be an RCQ format or a Pro Tour format because of the existence of the reserve list. It is largely a community-driven effort, but yearly there is a large Eternal Weekend, or two at that hand. On opposite sides of the world here, Eternal Weekend is a great gathering place for all these Eternal Magic players, and so that's a spot where these metagames matter. There's been a lot of discussion in previous years about, doing bannings close to Eternal Weekend, before, or whenever, and how that changes things up. We've had a lot of shakeup in Legacy over the last year. It's been a tumultuous time since the release of Modern Horizons 3, and some of the most powerful Magic cards ever made in this format just being actively banned over and over and over again, cards dying for each other's sins, whole different discussions. And so Legacy is a largely community-driven format. The sentiment of the community, the people playing it, and yes, win rates do matter, are a large part of that. And I think the sentiment of the community has been very divided, but it's been a strong one. Talking about, something needs to change, but the argument about whether that needs to be in the Oops All Spells deck or in the Dimir Reanimator deck, which, by the way, has seen so many bannings over the past year that a lot of people just thought it's time to get something gone. It's been a few months since we last took action in Legacy. Back in March, the only real way to engage with the Legacy format was by playing a form of Combo, Prisoner, or Eldrazi. Correct. At the time, our intent was explicitly to remove a negative play pattern of Sowing Microspawn to take Dimir Reanimator down a peg, and take Dimir Reanimator down a peg. So for those of you who don't know, I've talked about it in plenty of my videos, but Sowing Microspawn created a world where Sowing Microspawn came in at 6 mana, uncounterable a lot of time with Cavern of the Souls, but in a world full of soul mana, soul lands, it was easy to get out there. You would exile a basic land of your control opponent, and you would grab a wasteland to get their non-basic out. Essentially, the control decks were near unplayable. At this point, blue-based strategies were unplayable. So in order to play blue, Dimir Reanimator was at the top, or close to at the top, because they just played an almost instant win combo of just reanimating something absolutely insane. And so you have to do this over and over again. Multiple metagames over the past year, we've seen Dimir Reanimator have to be answered over and over and over and over again. And it feels like it's exhausting at this point. Yes, Sowing Microspawn held back the blue decks, but the Dimir Reanimator deck specifically, being a blue deck that was able to survive in some way, shape, or form in the world of Sowing Microspawn did mean something. And before that, it was a little different. But thus far, the results have been mixed to positive. Since the banning of Sowing Microspawn, Eldrazi decks have more or less vanished from the metagame, with Mystic Forge Artifact Combo taking its place as the most popular colorless deck. Dimir Reanimator, on the other hand, has remained the most played deck in the format, albeit at a lower win rate and a smaller share of the metagame. In a lot of ways, this process is working as intended. Okay, and you have to remember that the Eldrazi decks have been hyper-powered by Modern Horizons 3. It was a set that had so much colorless synergy in it, it's no surprise to it, and with kind of recent spoilers from the Edge of Eternity set, such as the new Tezzeret and everything, you can imagine that this is going to be a colorless forward type of set. This is going to be a set that a lot of Affinity players and Eldrazi players in general are going to be looking at, and so we might see a slow resurgence come the rise of Tezzeret. Ultimately, Eternal formats are a place where people want to feel like they can put a bunch of time into collecting cards for a deck and knowing it'll be viable over a long time, which I have a criticism about, by the way. Given that the most recent Legacy showcase in Magic Online had extremely diverse top 8 and a lone copy of Dimir Reanimator going out of the quarterfinals, I don't know if we need to quote one Legacy showcase. I think we need to take challenge data as well. Feels like Legacy players have directions to go if they want to be successful without playing Daze and Entomb together. So many things in this paragraph so far. Again, I want to revisit the whole idea of decks being viable over a long period of time, having an extremely diverse top 8 out of just one challenge, albeit a showcase, and decks that don't need to play Days in 2. It's hard for us to disentangle the reason that Dimir is showing up at a high rate. It's because it's the best deck in Legacy, or if Legacy is delivering on its promise of allowing players to play with the same cards year over year. One divisive topic in Legacy is the existence of Upsal Spells. So for those of you who don't understand, Upsal Spells is a balustrade spy deck that looks to mill itself out, and through some way, it will reanimate Thassa's Oracle. The problem with this deck is because of Modern Horizons 3 and the advent of 2 new untapped MDFCs, and that's all this deck needed. The fact that it got 2 new black untapped MDFCs is what threw this deck over the top. Nothing else. It was that. With that introduction, this deck has been able to consistently win on turn 1 at a high rate with and without protection, right? And I'm talking about, I'm talking about the counter spells off the top, like the Pact of Negation, Memory's Journey against like Surgical Extraction, all that stuff. And then out of the sideboard, it plays like Goblin Charbelcher as a switch. So you bring in all your graveyard hate, all of a sudden they win with Charbelcher. You bring in like your artifacts hate, all of a sudden they win with Balustrade Spy. It's really hard to hate out this deck. Upsal Spells is a deck that exists on the back of technicalities and technically complex rules interactions. I don't know. Okay, they're pretty simple. If you break it down, yes, they're complicated, but the rules interactions are pretty simple. I'm not gonna lie, it's pretty simple. The deck gets its name by not playing any cards that are lands on the front side, then maximizing on its interaction. Its initial configuration uses Balustrade Stride and Undercity Informer to mill its entire deck. So, you get the whole idea of the rule of 8s, where you have multiple copies of a similar effect that are now able to achieve some type of synergy that you're able to consistently grab to mill an entire deck. You have cards like Narcomoeba and Poxwalkers that return, that feel a dread return to get a Thassa's Oracle. After sideboarding, the deck goes into Charbelcher, all that stuff. To some, the deck can be particularly frustrating to lose, and it feels like it's abusing Magic's game engine more than it's playing the game of Magic. To other people, it's an illustration of why Magic's game engine is cool. Wait, what? To other people, it's an illustration of why Magic's game engine is cool. That's gonna piss some people off. Okay, as a Balustrade Spy player myself, I love me a Spy, I love me a good Charbelcher. It is cool. Objectively so. It is cool that you can take the fundamental resource of Magic the Gathering, flip it on its head, and technically not play any. That's cool. Problem is, when you take it to level 2, it's absolutely broken. It's absolutely codswallop. The deck is doing a bunch of things that shouldn't be allowed and rewards having a deep knowledge of the rules and cards in Magic. Deep knowledge? Oh, this paragraph's gonna piss people off. Oh, I don't know about deep knowledge. It's a pretty simple deck. If I'm gonna be playing a lot of this deck, I'm gonna be farming, like, not just me, but so many Legacy players are gonna be farming Legacy Elites because of this. It puts us in a difficult position of trying to arbitrate whether we think it has a positive or negative impact on the environment. It has a negative impact. Unlike other archetypes, so much of why this deck exists is because of one-of-a-kind cards that run the risk of killing a deck entirely. For now, the deck is showing up in a range that is acceptable. Oh my lord! I don't know what to say about this. Folks, we need to have a deeper discussion here. The Legacy metagame. So full transparency, I've gotten into Legacy as of late last year. It was like, I believe it was specifically November or December last year. And so I've had a recent run of Legacy. I've touched Legacy every so often here and there, but recently got into it. And I've of course gotten into it through Painter. As the mill player myself, of course, I'm going to be playing Painter. Over the last year, over that time, all I've seen are combo decks and decks that beat combo decks. Or it's just combo decks and decks that beat the decks that beat combo decks. AKA, there are mid-range decks, there are combo decks, and there are control decks, okay? The mid-range decks really subdivide because the hard control decks are decks like lands, right? Legacy Lands is a deck that really wants to grind you out. Grind you out through value over time. And a lot of people enjoy that gameplay, which is fair. It is highly interactive. There's a lot of decision making to be made, and it's one of the marquee pieces of what makes Legacy Legacy. It's also one of the most expensive decks in Legacy because it plays some of the most powerful lands in Legacy. Now, on the other hand, you have Oops All Spells. You have Legacy Lands, which is $8,000. You have Oops All Spells, which is $800. One of the best decks in the format because it just does some of the most broken crap known to humankind. Cards that are largely draft chaff that fundamentally changed in power level thanks to the MDFCs. You have the mid-range decks, which are Tempo, is a Delver, and the Reanimator decks, which are control combo decks. Essentially, control decks that have a combo finish, which in many ways Painter is as well. Painter is a mid-range deck that has a combo finish. Sneak and Show kind of evolved into that as well. Sneak and Show is kind of like a Tempo deck with a combo finish as well. So at this point, the format is telling you that you need to be super fast. Yes, you can have a control plan to stop like Oops All Spells and stuff, but you need to have a tempo finish, right? Or a combo finish. You need to have a highly efficient combo finish that can get out there because you don't want to go late. If you're going late like Legacy Lands, you're not going to get there. You're not going to get there because the Painter decks, the Oops All Spells decks, those type of decks that win instantly will be able to beat you out. You also have Red Stompy in here because unfortunately, the One Ring and Blood Moon coming together with a bunch of Chalice of the Voids and fast mana, who'd have thunk that it would be powerful? Now, Red Stompy is not necessarily a broken deck. It is a powerful deck taking advantage of a collection of powerful cards, right? So it's not trying to go A plus B plus C. It's trying to say, oh, A, B, C are together on the field. That's great, but I could also go B, D, F. I could also go H, I, Y. You know, I could just combine some things together and like, it would be great. Yes, there are some powerful cards like, yeah, you always want B if it's Blood Moon, if you always want this card if it's this. But there are decks in here that just need to go fast. Legacy is such a unforgiving metagame right now. If you do not have a quote unquote instant win somewhere, somehow, then you're just not going to get there. Even Stifle Knot is a deck that has an instant win, quote unquote, by just putting out a 1-mana 12/12, while also playing a control plan using Varrogoyfs and stock ups. Stifle Knot has been an Azorius deck for the large majority. The fact that it's now playing Varrogoyf is another thing. But largely speaking, Legacy might be at the point where I think trying to keep to the old ways might be a mistake. And this is the second thing I want to talk about. Firstly, I was kind of talking about the speed of the format. But it might be at the point where we're at the state of Magic the Gathering where keeping to old ways and stuff like that, right? So, you know, Entombs, Force of Will, stuff like that. I'm not advocating for a Force of Will ban. I'm just talking about pillars of the format, brainstorms, ponders, all that stuff. It might be time to stop considering these to be as untouchable as they should. And if we want untouched play patterns, we should be looking at siloed formats like pre-modern or old school or something like that. 98, 99, 97, 98, whatever these formats are that are just only specific metagames. They never grow. There's never any quote unquote adaptation. There are best decks and there's ways to adapt to that metagame. That's it. It might be time to take that type of gameplay where you have pillars of the format and untouched kind of isms and ways to think about the game and trap them into those formats and let the other formats move on from cards that are doing too much harm. This is like in Vintage where we've had so many cards be banned because Mishra's Workshop, a land that comes in and gives you 3 colorless mana that you can only use to pay for artifacts, has banned so many artifacts. Mishra's Workshop is a 4 of. In a format of restrictions, Mishra's Workshop has been allowed to be a 4 of. And in a format like that, it warps so much. So many cards have died for the sins of so many other things. And I think Force of Will Days is important to the format because they help police the broken things. But when some of the broken things go too far, it's hard to really justify pillars of the format. And this is why a lot of people have been talking about the banning of Entomb. 1 mana card, search your library for a card, put it into the graveyard, which soft acts as a tutor in a format with so many busted ways to get cards out of your graveyard. And so is it the time to ban cards like this? Ban Reanimate And it might not even be Reanimate, because if you think about Reanimate, I've talked about it in a previous video, Reanimate really has a home only in Legacy. It doesn't see a lot of play in Vintage. The play it plays has in Commander doesn't really matter. Commander's just a completely different ball game. When it comes to 60 card 1v1 constructed, the only place that Reanimate sees play is in Legacy to a high degree. So is it time to touch something else? Is it time to ban something else? Are we holding on to the idea of pillars of the format too much? And do we now need to divide and move away from that idea? Because Modern has done so for a hot minute. Modern has walked away from pillars of the format in many ways, right? We're past the point, I think, in many formats, Modern being one of the more popular formats out there that are front-facing, where holding on to older decks and the idea that you can build into a deck over time, that is a lost thing in Magic. You don't get to do it in Standard. You don't get to do it anymore in any format but Pioneer at this point, because Pioneer will never see a change. And so is it time to let this go? I'm posing that question out to all of you. And the last thing I wanted to talk about, I'm forgetting my talking point on this, but I don't know what's going on right now. My whole thing, oh, my keyboard I think is like gone. But regardless, what we're doing right now, if I can just charge I think my keyboard like fully died, but what we need to think about right now is if we are going to allow Legacy to continue the way it is as a community-driven format, where a lot of players in the game are content creators or are top performers and are community sentiment members, maybe LGS owners and stuff. And it's not necessarily purely about the empirical data that we get out of Eternal Weekends and on MTGO and stuff like that. Do we need to change the philosophy we had out of previous BNR announcements, where we see that, we see that the decision was made to keep the pillars of the format? And that is my big question with Legacy. Legacy is at a wild point with all of the kind of cards that can't be touched and all that stuff. There you go. My keyboard's back. Are we at a point where we need to make sure, so in order for Dimir to be changed, do we need to ban Entomb? Do we need to ban Reanimate? Do we need to ban Daze to make it so more broken things can happen? What is the direction that we want to take this Legacy format? Vintage is like kind of a lot of people thinking about Tezzeret. A lot of people talking about how Tezzeret Cruel Captain might be in Vintage, might be restricted within the end of the year, but we'll see. Right now, I want to talk about Standard. Format that I've gotten into over the last like about 2 months. I saw the format was really broken, so I thought, okay, this is a great time to just get in, learn a format, and then grow with it, right? So, Minute Standard. I talked about how a lot of people talk about how I complain a lot. This was an insane tweet, right? Honestly, people talk about how I complain a lot, but Tiago actually predicted 8 bans, like almost 8 bans, 6 of these bans. But I still blame this man because he put Rockface Village and temporary lockdown on here. This has to be one of the single stupidest tweets I've ever seen. This is so dumb. This doesn't make Enduring Curiosity. Like, again, the tweet is stupid. Yes, you predicted some of this, but I think a lot of people predicted some of this. Tiago, why are we putting temporary lockdown on here? The only answer that control decks have to aggro that is rotating in August, why are we banning that? Be for real. Be for real. Like, be honest with me. What? I don't know. Anyway, I just want to point that out. Standard. Cori-Steel Cutter, Abuelo's Awakening, Monstrous Rage, Heartfire Hero. So we have 2 red cards. Up the Beanstalk, Hopeless Nightmare, This Town, and the Big Enough for the 2 of us. So Cori-Steel Cutter out of the Is It Prowess decks, Abuelo out of the Omniscience deck, Heartfire Hero, Monstrous Rage out of the red decks, and breaks up the mouse package finally. Up the Beanstalk out of the Zur decks and just the domain decks in general. Hopeless Nightmare, and This Town and Big Enough out of not only the Orzhov, but also the Esper Blink decks, the Esper Bounce decks as well. And so I don't want to go through this whole spiel. I've kind of read through it a little bit. Yeah, Cori-Steel Cutter is really powerful, change the landscape of kind of thing. They still talk about how they want Omniscience as a deck to exist, especially because it's a Foundations card. And in many ways, Abuelo's Awakening is banned, but also there are other cards that bring back enchantments from the graveyard. So all this does with Omniscience is shift it back by a turn. But because of how control is kind of wide open now, like the metagame will slow down. There is a couple decks that are probably going to rise up to the top. So Omniscience may not actually be as playable with the amount of interaction that is going to exist in the format. So I think that's perfectly fine. Omniscience is going to be able to self-balance. And so Abuelo can perfectly go. But in many ways, I don't know if Abuelo really needed to go, because if we predict control to be at the top of the metagame, then we probably, don't need to ban it. But regardless, it's gone. I personally am playing standard through the Omniscience deck. And so, okay, whatever, Omniscience is going to get banned. We'll just have to deal with it. Mono red is gone as well. Domain Overlords took a hit. Orzhov Pixie as a way to kind of grind out people through games. So first, with the large card pool of 3-year standard, we need to be more precise with our mana. So I want to go over this last section because this is important. It's been a little over 2 years since we announced the shift to 3-year standard. And a lot of cards that exist in standard right now weren't made in mind with 3 years, right? So we have to be completely aware of that and give Wizards a little bit of grace when it comes to them. With every set we release, we learn more about how to adapt our design heuristics to this new model for standard. This is a set of bans. This set of bans is emblematic of 2 key learnings we want to carry forward into the future. This is kind of nice. We get some updates. First, with the larger card pool of 3-year standard, we want to be more precise with our one mana cards and our cards that synergize with 1 mana cards. 3 of the cards banned today cost 1 mana. Cori-Steel Cutter asked to be played alongside the cheapest cards available. The potential for 1 mana cards to define a format grows as the pool increases, which is true. We see that in Pioneer. We see that especially so in Modern, definitely in Vintage and in Legacy. Pauper as well, by the way. 1 mana cards all over the place. We've learned that going to 3-year standard is the largest step in that direction than we had first believed. Standard is more fun when the stars of the games often cost more than 1 or 2 mana, which is true. And we all take steps to ensure that this is true more often. Second, we need to scrutinize and be careful with the rate of cards that are challenging to interact with favorably. With the increased power level of decks and formats with larger 3-year standard, decks are very capable of turning small advantage into a snowball at the end. Strong cards that leave resources behind when dealt with, like Cori-Steel Cutter. If you deal with the creature, you're left with the cutter. If you deal with the cutter, you're left with the creature. Up to Beanstalk replaces itself and then just able to get passive value. A lot of times you don't realize it, but you've actually lost to Up to Beanstalk, not to the cards that they're casting, because Up to Beanstalk has allowed them to draw more and more potentially duplicates and other versions of cards that they've already cast. Reliably create the first small advantage. Identifying these cards and evaluating their strength in the context of their interactional requirements is a task that the play design team is incorporating into our process moving forward, which is kind of scary if we haven't been doing that already. One last announcement for standard today. Considering our next standard rotation won't be until early 2027, we will be having 2 of our early rotation standard banning windows before the next standard rotation. You can expect one of these windows in about 18 months, right before rotation as usual. The other one will be roughly 9 months around the midway point. But we have decided on we haven't decided on an exact date just yet. So standard. Okay. Notably, I want to point out VV untouched in this. There is a VV Cauldron deck running around. There is a VV combo Cauldron deck running around with Agatha's Soul Cauldron and VV to be able to give some other bunksy things, some amount of like activations of those, and then you're just going off that way, right? You're casting a bunch of spells, you're doing a bunch of damage, you're doing stuff and things. So I just want to point out that Izzet Prowess may have taken a big hit, but there is still an Izzet Storm deck and a place for Final Fantasy's craziest magic card in VV Ornithir to have a place in standard. I'm just pointing that out, okay? The rest of the standard metagame is kind of wide open at this point. A lot of the top decks took a hit. The Domain deck, Omniscience, red decks, self-bounce, Control is wide open, Mono Black, just got Control, nah, not really. But what we see is that Control, just got Control, Mono Black, and Golgari midrange, heck, even Dimir midrange is going to be at the top. It might actually be a slow and interactive standard. There might be an aggressive deck, but one thing I want to preface is that in the next month or so, we might get a slow and interactive standard. But come the new set in Edge of Eternities, we are going to be getting colorless synergies out the wazoo. My prediction is going to be a little brother to Modern Horizons 3. And I say that off the back of Tezzeret. Tezzeret is a card that asks for the set to have a lot of artifacts in it. And I don't want to be like tinfoil hatty here, but I do want to point out we do have a Mox in standard right now. So Mox, yes, you do require a dragon, but that doesn't mean we don't get shapeshifters in the future. And with the 3-year standard, with a critical mass of artifacts, we could see the return of some type of broken, busted aggro deck. VV Ornithir is already there. There are graveyard synergies already existing in and out of standard. Yes, there are answers to it, but we need to be hyper aware of what is happening down the line. Colorless cards are dangerous Magic cards in formats that can't answer them really efficiently, right? So we need to be careful and aware of the type of decks that we're building into and how we can answer these decks in the future. I am honestly worried about the effect of Edge of Eternities on standard. I think Final Fantasy has had largely an okay impact. VV Ornithir is obviously a standout. We had Yuna in the domain deck as well, which is great. But I think we're going to have a large impact out of the cheap and efficient cards that come out of Edge of Eternities, because we have to remember that their shift towards designing around, being careful around the 1-mana stuff and all that, that shift is happening now. Edge of Eternities has already been printed. It is distributors. It'll be sent out down the line. The ambassadors are being chosen. The previews are going to happen. It's already set. So I am very worried about where standard is going come a big, colorless, artifact-heavy synergy type of set. That doesn't mean it's going to be a good set. That doesn't mean it's necessarily going to be a broken set. I am just being simply predictive of what is happening come down the line. So I think overall, standard is wide open right now. I don't have any great predictions for it because I've only been playing it for 2 months. I can only speak to my previous experience and what I see coming down the line based on the information that we have. So I'm really excited to be brewing around it. I want to see how we can adapt it. Omniscience, I'll probably take a bunch of my pieces and start playing like Azorius Control as well. But I do enjoy playing some fast Magic. I don't like spending forever to like finish games and everything unless I'm like active. I like doing that in mill. But we know that Jace the Perfected Mind is kind of shifting out of standard. There are mill cards, with the Water Crystal and all that stuff. There are mill cards in standard right now, River Churn Monument and all that. So if the format slows down, there is a world where Azorius Control actually still has a mill win condition. It just has to be slightly adapted. Notably, with that, stock up is still there as well. I think that's also very relevant to note in a world where combo decks can exist and people want key pieces. Stock up is just going to skyrocket in price. I think stock up is going to be one of the mainstays of the standard environment. And I'm so happy in paper that I got my playset at $2. I knew that card was going to be a slam dunk when it came to EDH. I saw that, when I buy cards like that, I make sure I get a playset just in case it becomes really powerful or I need it down the line. I got my playset of stock up already. It might be too late for many of you. We are going to see how different cards develop. Shieldred notably is in this format as well, but will actually rotate relatively soon. So yes, Shieldred could be really broken as well, but at least it's not going to be forever. We're going to know rotation is going to come down the line in a little over a month and a half and all that stuff. 2 months, whatever. So those are my thoughts on standard. Largely speaking, the Omniscience deck, quote unquote, still exists. It might just be a different color, but regardless, there are other artifacts there are other colors that bring or return our enchantments back from the graveyard. It will just be shifted up a turn, which will make it a lot worse. If the control and mid-range decks get up there, the Omniscience deck just gets worse naturally because it gets slower, not faster. Stock up is still all over the place, and I want to be hyper aware of the colorless synergies coming down the line with Edge of Eternities. So that is my big video on the banned and restricted announcement of June 30th, 2025. A lot of negativity in it, but I do want to highlight there was some positive things. I am trying to be a little bit better when it comes to my opinions on stuff like Modern. Pioneer is an absolute joke of the format. I hate that y'all made me get into it, but now I'm in it. Standard, I'm excited to see where things go. I've invested some time into it. I'm excited to continue to play the format. Legacy is wild that we're getting no changes, and I think we need to potentially have a discussion about a Legacy format panel, and I think that's where I want to end this video off. The Pauper Format panel has been one of the single most successful implementations of something like this in Magic. It is honestly, in my opinion, is more successful than the Commander Committee when it was a thing. And that's nothing against them. It's a very ambiguous format to be the committee of. So it's not necessarily like a hit on them. I'm saying it's more successful in the light that they have more data and more information to work with. And Gavin Verhey has proven time and time again that he is excited about Magic, he is informed about Magic, and continues to make great decisions around Magic. I trust Gavin. And Gavin, if you're watching this, please bring back Tiny Leaders. We have a Discord about Tiny Leaders Reborn. You were the one that posted the article so many years ago. We need to bring back Tiny Leaders. Let's talk, right? And you know what? It shouldn't even be me. I don't want to be the head of it. There are other great people that are, I just want to be the one bringing about the news about it. But go talk to, the folks in the Tiny Leaders Discord. Regardless, when it comes to that format panel, Pauper has flourished because of it. It has had multiple metagames where it is great gameplay. So many good things are happening, especially right now. It is a great time to be playing Pauper. I think it's time that a concerted effort needs to be made for this to happen for the Legacy format. I think we're at that point, and I think a lot of community members are going to start kind of mirroring this, that Legacy is a little mismanaged. There needs to be some dedicated players in this, and there needs to be more data-driven approaches to this. And it's a very nuanced thing because of the existence of the reserve list and how we don't have large-scale data sources that are consistent through Pro Tours and RCQs, which is fair. I think there needs to be a bigger effort made for something like Legacy. As the most accessible, I shouldn't say most accessible, that's wrong. The most accessible Eternal format is Commander, then Pauper, then Legacy. But as a very front-facing Eternal format that a lot of players have invested time into, a lot of players engage with, it is worth putting a format panel into, albeit maybe small and maybe even temporary if needed, to manage this format and make decisions for. I think there's a lot of lack of good voices around it, a lot of kind of dissent with a lot of Legacy players leaving the format. I always think about just letting go of the format as well, but after getting into it over the past couple of months, I do enjoy the gameplay. It's just a very inaccessible format when it comes to people playing in paper, a little bit more so when it comes to playing online, but still, it's at a crazy place. And I think that's all I have to say. I think we need to bring a format panel in to save Legacy. That is the only way we can do it. And if we don't save Legacy, I think this BNR announcement is going to shift more people away. It's only just going to keep the enfranchised players in. There's going to be a lot less interest. Every time I post a Legacy video, I know it doesn't get a lot of views, but that's fair. I'm not posting like the top of the top high quality content as well when it comes to Legacy. So that's, I accept my criticism when it comes to that as well. But, the viewership just isn't there. The viewership is all in Commander, and there is viewership when it comes to other constructed formats, but it's a really big gaping hole in Legacy. And the hole continues to grow with more and more players leaving year after year. I think Modern's in a different place. I think Modern has room to grow. There is innovation happening, although it is very frustrating to see Energy and Modern Horizon Soup, Modern Horizon Block Constructed continue. But that's just what Modern is at this point. We're at that acceptance point. We just have to be okay with it. And I don't know. I think there is hope. Like, I do feel hopeful with the state of Magic in general. But there is, like, the problems I have with it just feel so large. And maybe that's my brain blowing it up. That's just what the human nature of it is. But I just can't help but have a sinking feeling every time I play certain formats like Pioneer and Legacy. I don't feel that way for Modern. I maybe that's my bias of loving Modern so much, but I feel like there's something wrong, and I don't know if it's fixable, and maybe it's just a philosophy change that we need for our 60 card constructed formats.